Right, hey guys, Jack here from Peach. We're here today at the Suhr factory and thought this would be a great opportunity. We've had a great chat already with Kevin and of course John. We wanted to dive a little deeper into something that I kind of touched on in another video which you may have already seen at this point, but I wanted to go a bit further with Kevin's discovery delay. So you may have seen we actually did a video on this before when it launched almost a couple of years ago at this point, and I was never quite satisfied with what we managed to get out of it because just didn't have the time to delve into it. And I think it's such the main thing I want to put across here is Kevin's going to do the tweaking and a bit of the explaining as to kind of the design ideals, but really I want to show you how good this thing sounds. And maybe that didn't quite come across at first. So if you're happy to, Kevin, we'll touch a little bit on, you know, why this came to be, why you decided to create an analog inspired delay in this way, but really I want you to show me how good this thing can sound.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to tweak and all that stuff. I mean, we're just trying to create a cool analog delay that just had some features that others didn't. You know, one of the things that's hard to tell with analog delays is just what delay time it is. A lot of times it was kind of rotating the knob very slowly, and if you have a session where you're tracking, say, 120 BPM, and I want my delay to be like a triplet or something based off that, it's not the easiest thing to figure out.
To be accurate.
Yeah, so with this, you know, we have the millisecond display and we have the BPM display. So if I wanted 120 BPM, I could set it to 120, and then we have division. So this is quarter note, dotted eighth, eighth note, triplet, and 16th. So that was one of the main features that I wanted to add to delay, just so that you can get into time with your music, and same with the MIDI capabilities, switching presets, and also MIDI sync. You can get in time with a MIDI clock, so that you have an analog delay that will sync up with modern gear, your DAW or a switcher or things like that. So
sure. Plus, obviously, you have the tap. So if you're using it in a live setting
as well.
Yeah. So I mean, the functionality of it is fantastic. And I guess was your reference point kind of Memory Man?
Yeah, probably the Memory Man was the closest thing, because when I listened to all these analog delays, I mean, of course, there's analog delays that have more character or things like that. When I always listened to a bunch of shootouts, I always thought the Memory Man was kind of the closest thing to what I was going for, just something that had like a bunch of bandwidth and that sounded really great. And I didn't want to get like too much into a certain type of character where it's like, okay, this is good for that one thing. I didn't really want it to be like some sort of one-trick pony or something. I just wanted it to be kind of a good analog delay, and it depends on, I guess, what you want, you know. Some people are like, well, I want it to sound really messed up and dirty and destroyed or something, and I was trying to go for something that's more high fidelity, I think, and but using the bucket brigades like these old circuits.
Yeah, well, I think the buzzword analog implies to a lot of people dark, muddy, you know, kind of stays out of the way of while you were playing. The tones we were just getting while we were setting up, and you were just tweaking a little bit for me, were almost crystalline, you know, not like super 100% digital, super clean, but there's loads of character in top end, which doesn't necessarily always come across with delay. So before we go too deep into this, can we just kind of touch on those kind of sounds, you know, that almost shimmery kind of thing? I know, you know, I'm playing pretty clean so far, but I'm just going to play, Kevin's going to tweak, and we'll see
I'll
what
set
happens.
it to the brightest setting, and you know, before we go into that, I'll just say, you know, in terms of the dark sounds, a lot of that just has to do with the internal filtering. So because we put 4 bucket brigades in here, we can get to like 1,000 milliseconds, and every bucket brigade adds around 250 milliseconds.
Okay.
So we added 4 in there, which is just a lot more, and that allows you to get brighter top end.
Yeah.
And these things run on clocks, so people filter them. So if they use less chips, they have to filter them more, and that's why people think they sound dark. But we did add the filter on the front. It's a high cut control, so you're able to get those bright sounds, but if you want to get the dark sounds of like a lot of those other dark delays, you can just...
You have the control.
You have the control for that. So
okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's check it out.
So yeah, 270 milliseconds. You know, also typical with a lot of delays is like the shorter delay time, you can get a little more top end. As you start to stretch the time to be slower, a lot of times you lose some of that fidelity.
Sure. Okay. So well, let's start at one extreme and work our way to the other. So that was kind of a good representation of the ambient thing. Can we shorten the delay and kind of get a little more of a slap?
Sure.
You know, room time. I mean, we can go a lot further because you were telling me about the kind of almost flange
chorus
capabilities.
Kind of things. Yeah, and you know, I typically like a lot of wetness, a lot of regen, so that's probably what I err on that side too.
Okay.
But, yeah, I'll try and
let's go a little sort of cleaner slap, and then I want to get into that chorus flangey territory as well.
One thing with the slap that I like, there is 2 buttons here where you can actually increment and decrement the milliseconds per the millisecond. So when it comes to figuring out like the exact slap delay I want, sometimes I just pick a string and I'll just figure out what speed I want. So
I'm boring and sad enough that I know exactly what speed I like for
me.
slap. 132.
Well, see, there we go.
Sounds good to me.
I can just go 132. So we had it pretty much full. I was starting to turn down a little bit as you were going through, but that was pretty much full. I don't like to say 50-50% because that kind of entails that, I'm losing half my dry and I'm mixing in half wet.
Right.
I like to, a lot of times when it's up the middle, I like to say it's 100-100 because your dry stays 100%, but you're starting to mix all the
so if we were to back it off to say, I guess 30%, do you find that do you then have to compensate with the EQ, or do you just like the change in character to kind of be dictated by the mix, if that makes sense? So if we back it off to about 30% mix, did you voice it in a way that the character changes, or do you like it to stay the same and then you can EQ it if you want?
Yeah, with the mix, it's just pure mix, so nothing else will change on you. But if you want, like, again, we've been running this with the full brightness too, so there's a lot of things you can do. I've already got some of the low cut on just to allow your bottom strings to not echo as much as your top strings. I find that allows things to play clearer, and that's one of the difficulties I'd have. You know, a lot of analog delays are just straight mix regen delay time. So if you're playing with more wet settings or stuff, it's going to become very messy. It's going to be hard to play some of the low string. I mean, if you like pluck your bottom E, so this is full bottom. It's like not affecting as I turn it up all the way. You're not echoing those. But if you play like a top high string, you're still getting echo on those top strings. So with this low cut, you can kind of shave which area of your strings are being delayed. And that allows you to shave the delays to kind of fit with what you're trying to do.
Sure, okay. So if I was to play something a little more rhythmical, how would you go about voicing the delay? So, you know, I'll play some chords that kind of have some high string stuff in there, some open string, and some thick low string notes, and, you know, we'll play around with the filtering to see how we can voice it in a way that sounds good. When
you say rhythmic, you know, I kind of figure like what I want to be rhythmic. When I'm doing things like dotted eighth, where I want it to be like, I usually just have the filters kind of all the way, all bass, all trebles there. It's just kind of flat. That way, like, all my strings will kind of echo.
Okay, well, that would be too easy. So I'm going to play some weird stuff, and Kevin can just react in real time and make it sound good. Hopefully. We'll see. In fact, I'll even put some gain on as well. We'll try it with a little distortion. we dial back some of the mix just to hear kind of how the guitar tone plays into that.
So I kind of turned off the regen because a lot of times,
yeah,
when
you don't want too much
rhythmic
of that
stuff, you don't want it to just get collide all over the place.
But I mean, the important thing to stress here as well is we're running mono. One amp. This is just into the front of the amp as well, and there's kind of this expectation that to have a huge delay sound like that, you need to have all this kind of complicated routing and stereo and all this stuff and high fidelity, everything, and actually just one pedal into the front of an amp. We're getting a huge, huge delay sound. How important is that? And obviously, this has stereo capability and stuff like that, but...
Well, not in the box, but it does have the ability to link up another unit so that you could try and run two individual units as like a stereo thing.
So was that kind of... I mean, we talked when we were setting this up about whether you wanted to use it in the loop or in front of an amp, and you said Did you kind of voice this to be used in a more traditional way, to be in front of an amp, or how did you...
I mean, that was one of the most difficult parts of the whole design because, the delay in front of the amp is going to sound completely different than in the loop. So, I mean, in the front, you're going to get the saturation of the amp on your delay repeats, which can help, especially when you have a dark analog delay, like a more traditional one. Adding saturation on top of it will give it those harmonics, which will make it sound more normal again.
Yep.
When you put it into the loop, you're definitely going to hear more of the character of the delay because you're not kind of running it into the front, you're just kind of running your already distorted sound into it.
You're having like a print of the tone fed cleanly into the delay.
So when you run it into the loop, you're going to already hear it a lot. There's like pros and cons to both because when you run it to the front, a lot of times the regen becomes more unruly. It kind of can get crazy, so you have to really tame the delay, and that's where the mix regen and these filters will really come in handy. I think the filtering is one of the coolest things about this delay is that it will allow you to take off the bottom if you want, or the top, to allow you to try and tame the delays for going into the front end of an amp. When you go into the loop, the benefits of the loop is you're not going to be amplifying the noise of the delay. So a lot of analog delays are just inherently noisy. There's a lot of tricks that go into these designs to try and lower the noise floor. A lot of tricks that were used in old tape machines like the DBX noise reduction, treble boosting, treble cutting, companding. So when you run this thing into the loop, you're not going to be amplifying the noise, the natural noise of an analog delay. So there's that benefit. But you're not going to be saturating the delay repeats. So you'll hear, maybe if you're running like a overdrive into this in the delay, into the loop, you're going to hear it actually sound maybe darker because you're not adding the saturation to the repeats. You're kind of hearing the filtering more of the repeats because you have all these harmonics that are going into it from the amp or the distortion part of it, and then you hear the filtering. So they sound completely different. It's hard to voice an analog delay to work
that's a very good
for both.
Complete answer there. So
I think for me,
makes sense.
My goal was just like, I just want to give you as much bandwidth as possible, as much of the frequency spectrum as possible, not filter it already to where it's dark already. I want you to have the ability to get those bright tones, but then filter it if you want. Because then you have the control. I mean, if you're running this and you have a higher gain setting on the amp and you're hearing all this noise, you can turn up the high cut and usually find a spot that will kill the noise but still have the clarity.
Yeah.
A lot of times with all these other designs, you're kind of fixed with the filtering that they've got, and so this might work well in the loop, but like this darker delay might work better in the front.
Sure.
So I was trying to, I think with the filter controls, it allows you to kind of make it work in both situations, the front or the loop.
Yeah, you just have to know how to prepare for each. For either setup.
You kind of have to know what to expect and like what are the pros and cons of both. But if you're going for like a really clean thing, a lot of times the loop can work, and it, maybe more traditional to where it's just like a lot of times people put delay at the end of the whole chain. This is kind of like in the front, so it's like it could be going through an overdrive, or it could be going, if your amp is hot, then you're overdriving your delays. And so it's just
okay. Well, next challenge then is a lot of people go to analog delays for that warm, the kind of thing where you don't necessarily notice that it's there until it's not there. So that's kind of the magic that backs you up, especially if you're playing solos and stuff like that. So I'll go for more of a lead tone, and maybe we can start with the mix fully off, and you kind of feather it in. And I want this to be like a kind of, it's supporting the tone without necessarily getting in the way. And that's what most people go to analog delays for.
Sure.
And I know this can do it. So let's see what we could get. Yeah, and the trails are really musical as well. They don't necessarily do that whole fully degrading thing, which some people really like that. I've never really gone for that myself. So
that was another difficult part of the design. Yeah, it's like trying to get those trails to not choke up a lot. I found I really spent so much time tweaking this thing and doing so many iterations, and that was one of the important things. The other important thing too is like I have a Benson Echo Rec, and when you regen that thing, it can kind of just last forever. And I could walk away for 10 minutes and come back and still be regenerating, but it will sound pretty musical too. It's not going to be like scaring you. It's not like crazy top end. It's pretty like smooth, and so that's another one. I mean, a lot of times I like to use the delay as to play with to make noises, and then there's people that play it to make their guitar sound good. But
okay, I'm gonna put you on the spot then. Let's do that. Let's get the kind of pad thing happening where it's almost that infinite sustain without the regen carrying away too much. I'll play clean, compressed. You know, we'll kind of just get a little bit of a pad thing happening.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can do. You know, you really need you to come with every purchase, or someone, you know, someone to just tweak it for you as you play. Because it's, and I know you can have expression pedal control, you know, and that's a whole rabbit hole we probably don't need to go down. But part of the magic of this for that kind of sound is adjusting in real time, like it's an instrument. It's as much an instrument as what you're doing here.
Totally.
To the point where I was hardly playing anything. You were the one crafting the kind of the avenue that the music went through. So.
I mean, you know, as a designer, I had a lot of time to do this, tweaking the knobs, playing it, trying to make sure I can get long regens, trying to make sure that it sounds musical and smooth, and I was pretty relentless in trying to get that kind of thing. And for me to get that kind of thing, I put like a soft clipping limiter in the feedback path so that you can, as you try and regen a lot, it's going to hit a limit and it's going to start to smooth and saturate a bit, but it just makes sure that it doesn't overpass that limit, because if you don't put some sort of limiting or some sort of mechanism to stop it from getting louder and louder.
If it just runs away.
It'll run away and it'll get bigger and bigger, and then all of a sudden your speaker is about to explode and you're going to scare everybody. So,
which we don't want.
Yeah. So that was one of the things I really wanted to be like, almost like a musical instrument in itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, I guess because I've designed it, I kind of know, settings and know how
so
to do
just watch the video back, see how Kevin did it in real time, and you'll learn some tricks.
But that's why I did the expression pedal too. With the mapping, you can set the expression pedal back, set your knobs, and then set it forward, set your knobs, and then you can sweep between those two settings. So if you want to set the regen up and start filtering and cutting out the high end as you move the expression pedal forward, you can do that for the moments you want it to sound like that pad, but then you can back it off and
and you don't have to program that.
Yeah, you don't
change that control. You just do it by setting the physical controls.
Yeah, you just kind of you hold this edit button and you're going to edit a preset, and you just set the expression pedal back, set your knobs, set it all the way forward, set your knobs. There's even a little dot that will indicate if you're on the top or bottom. And then while you're still editing, you can play it and make sure it's what you want.
Sure.
If you find those settings, then you won't need me to tweak it for you. You can do it kind of with
well,
the
I'd still like to have you around. So last thing I want to talk about is I mean, you tempted me from the off when you said you can kind of make it sound like a flanger, which we did, and it sounded great. So maybe we can touch on that a little bit, which is not usual territory for a delay. You know, it's very hard to, because you're talking about the smallest millisecond range. I mean, where would you say we'd be at, like between 25, 30?
Yeah, you can overclock this thing. And actually, you can underclock this thing too. I haven't even shown you that, but you can. I've put some crazy work into trying to push this thing into boundaries that most analog delays won't go. I mean, I could get this thing to run over 7 seconds. It won't sound great, but you'll get something that you know will sound like an analog delay clock that speed. But we can clock it fast, and I added extra buffers in the clock circuit so that we can clock 4 bucket brigades really fast, and that will allow you to get kind of a chorus, almost a flanging kind of thing.
Sure.
And yeah, we can demonstrate that.
Let's try it. So it's such a warm sound, and you usually hear with delays, if you try and do that, just because of their physical limitations, I guess, it starts to sound really thin, because you're pushing the delay to the absolute brink of what it can do. That sounds completely controlled. You know, you've still got the EQ filtering to play with, and it still sounds warm. You know, if you told me that was a chorus pedal, then I would believe it. And you could just store that as a preset.
Yeah.
And then jump to a delay, a longer delay on another preset. So
True.
It does a hell of a lot, and I think I kind of wanted to do this video to put across the way that it does it, so I can only thank you for that. You know, showing how easy it is to do it, and yet there's a whole world of possibilities there. So maybe if you haven't really played around with delay too much, or if you have and you thought it's not for you, this might be the pedal that changes your opinion. And it's not inexpensive, but it's not easy to find something that's this musical either. And I think that's the thing I really wanted to put across. So unless there's anything else you wanted to tell people about it, Kevin, I mean, we could go on for a very, very long time.
We could go on for a very long time. You know, the most we've gone is like 700 milliseconds, but I mean, we could try and push. I don't think anyone really knows about this hack, but if you switch it over to BPM, if you hold this button down, you can switch it over to BPM, and then you can actually push it to lower BPMs, and then you can actually hear the clock noise come
Yep.
in. And then I can actually put it back to milliseconds. So right now we're at 1875 milliseconds. I can go even further. And you'll hear how messed up it's going to sound, but go ahead.
Okay, well, you know what? This is a good way to sign off this video. So you're going to hear you're going to hear new territories of guitar tone.
This is 3,500, and I can shave the clock noise off with a high cut a little bit.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching, guys. If you want to find out more information about this, you can, of course, go to the website. But this should tell you everything you need to know about the Discovery. Thanks for watching.